Poor girl jumped into a rich man's pool, begging for help. She had no idea he was the billionaire CEO who loved her. And she was soaked in rain, shaking as she asked, "My mom's dying. The hospital said you're the only one who can save her. I'll do anything, please." He didn't flinch. He just stared at her like she was part of a negotiation. "Asking anything?" he asked. She nodded, desperate. "Yeah, then marry me." Her heart stopped. "What?" "You heard me. You want my blood? Become my wife." She thought he was joking. Arrogant, cruel. But his face didn't change. And her mother's life was slipping away with every second she hesitated. And so she whispered, "Okay." She thought it was just a deal. She had no idea. He was her new boss. And he had loved her long before she ever knew his name. Deal I never thought I'd take. They say no one makes good decisions at midnight. But at 12:04 a.m., standing under a flickering hospital sign, with rain in my hair and my mother's blood pressure crashing on a monitor 2 floors up, I said yes to a man I'd never met. Not because I loved him, not because I even liked him, but because he was the only one in the entire state whose blood could save her. His name was James Whitaker. He didn't offer kindness or comfort or even the courtesy of a warm tone. He just looked at me, dry and immaculate in his $1,000 suit, and said, "I want my blood, marry me." A new exploration. No hesitation. And Elena Brooks, a part-time barista with a broke-down car and a mother barely clinging to life, whispered, "Okay?" That's how our story began. Not with love. Not even with hope. Just a contract sealed in silence, and the faint sound of my own heart breaking. The marriage certificate was processed in less than 24 hours. His lawyers moved faster than my panic. We didn't exchange vows, we didn't exchange rings. Just signatures notarized in the back of a glass-paneled legal office where no one looked me in the eye. "You can keep your name," he said flatly, sliding the papers toward me. I nodded. Because what else was I supposed to say? "Thank you. Congratulations." I was marrying a man whose first gift to me was a unit of O negative and a marriage license I didn't ask for. But I meant what I said. I would have done anything to save my mom. Even this. We didn't live together at first. He sent me to a quiet apartment on the edge of the city, fully furnished, fridge stocked, with a single envelope on the table. No media. No social posts. No falling in love? I laughed at that third one, as if that were even remotely possible. I found a job a few weeks later, office assistant, clean hours, good pay. I didn't even realize what company it was until the first staff meeting. "Welcome to Whitaker Group," the HR director smiled. "We're thrilled to have you." I nearly dropped my coffee. And then, as if summoned by fate or sarcasm, James Whitaker walked in, every bit the cold, untouchable CEO in front of 100 people who bowed their heads like he was royalty. He didn't even glance at me. Not once. Like I didn't exist. And honestly, that should have made it easier. But it didn't. He started appearing more after that. Little things. Just a passing glance in the elevator. A file tossed onto my desk that he could have easily emailed. And one afternoon, a single post-it note stuck to my keyboard. "Bring this to my office." To no name, no signature. But I knew who it was from. Inside his office, he didn't speak right away. He just looked at me, like he was trying to remember something important and couldn't quite reach it. "You don't have to pretend not to know me," I finally said, voice quiet. He blinked once. Slowly. "I'm not pretending," he said. And then he stood, walked around the desk, closed the door behind me. "You're my wife," he said. I swallowed. "Only on paper?" He stepped closer. "Then let me rewrite the story." I didn't answer. I didn't trust myself to. But the worst part? And where beneath the silence, A small part of me wanted him to mean it. Later that night, I made soup. Not because he asked, just because the air felt too still and I needed to fill the space with something human. When I brought the bowl to his table, he didn't look surprised. He just said, "I used to eat this when I was a kid." "Why do you know it's the same?" "I don't," he said, taking a bite, "but it tastes like something worth remembering." I still didn't know why he married me, but he got out of it. It was no inheritance, no clause in a will, no dying wish from a grandmother. Just me, broke, tired, and full of walls. And him, cold, unreadable, with eyes that made me feel seen and invisible all at once. The first time he touched me was accidental. We were reaching for the same file. My hand brushed his, and I felt it, this flicker, like a spark from a wire no one realized was live. Both froze. Then he pulled back first. "You should be careful," he said. "I should be careful," I laughed. "You're the one making marriage a business model." Something shifted in his eyes. "Is that what you think this is?" And before I could answer, he walked away. I didn't know it yet. But James Whittaker had loved me long before I knew his name. And everything, the blood, the deal, the job, was just his clumsy, complicated way of keeping me close. What I also didn't know, he had lied. And when I found out the truth, everything would break. Chapter 1. A Price for Blood. Elena Brooks didn't believe in miracles. But that didn't stop her from praying for one as she stood barefoot in a hospital hallway, hands trembling, face still wet from the rain she hadn't noticed had stopped. The emergency room smelled like bleach and exhaustion. Behind a closed door, her mother's monitors beat too slow, too soft. The nurse who'd been calm for the last hour now avoided eye contact. "She needs O negative," the nurse finally said, voice low, clinical. "A lot of it. We've run the registry, only one match in the Metro database." Elena looked up. "Then call them." The nurse hesitated. "We did. And..." I declined. Her stomach dropped. She gripped the edge of the chair to stay upright. "I'm sorry," the nurse added. "I really am." Elena walked out into the night because she didn't know where else to go. She stood under a broken street lamp, chest heaving. A vending machine flickered behind her, offering water and cheap candy like it could undo the ache clawing through her ribs. One match. One person who could save her mother. And they'd said no. She didn't know how long she stood there before a voice broke the silence. "Elena Brooke." She turned, startled. A man in a black coat stood by the hospital gate. He looked like he didn't belong here. Clean, expensive, untouchable. "Oh, hello. I was sent by Mr. Whittaker," he said, handing her a small card. "He'd like to speak with you." Elena stared at the name, embossed in gold. James Whittaker. In her eyes, she'd heard of him. Everyone had. CEO of the Whittaker Group, worth billions, powerful, brilliant, and cold as stone. "I don't understand," she said quietly. "Why would he want to speak to me?" The man said nothing, just held the door open. She stepped into the car, because desperation does things to a person: flattens fear, dulls instinct, replaces it with one question. What would you give to save the person you love most? But that was her answer. Whittaker's penthouse felt like a movie set. Glass, steel, silence, not a single speck out of place. Elena had never felt more out of place in her life. He was already there, standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city like he owned it. And maybe he did. He didn't look surprised to see her. He didn't offer a seat. "You're here," was all he said. "I don't know why," she replied, voice tight. "But you're..." "I'm the donor," he interrupted. She blinked. "The O negative?" He nodded once. "Then you knew," she said, breath catching. "You knew it was my mom." "She'll live," he said. Something about the way he said it, not cruel but casual, made her feel small, like her panic was an inconvenience. "Hasn't yet," she whispered. "We're still waiting." He turned then. He looked at her, and it was like a switch flipped. His voice didn't soften, but it slowed. "I'll do it," he said. She stared. "You'll donate?" "I'll save her." Elena felt her knees wobble with relief. "Thank you," she exhaled. "Thank you, But there's one condition." The words landed like a slap. She froze. "Why?" "The condition," he repeated. "I'll pay. I'll take out a loan. I'll work off whatever you want." "Marry me." Silence. Pure, complete, suffocating silence. She stared at him, lips parting, unable to form words. "What's your condition?" she asked finally. "Marriage?" "To someone you don't know." His expression didn't change. "You said you'd do anything." And they should have walked out. She should have screamed at him, called him thick, stormed back to her mother's bedside, and watched the hours drain out with dignity. But instead, she sat. Because dignity doesn't matter when the person you love most in the world is dying in the next building over. "Why me?" she whispered. "You'll find out later," he said. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, her voice barely held together. "Fine. If it saves her, I'll do it." His eyes lingered on her for a moment longer than they should have. Then he picked up his phone. "Have the documents prepared. Tonight." She thought it would be a staged agreement, a fake ID, something casual and reversible. But when she showed up at the notary's office at 2 a.m., the papers were. So was the marriage license. So was the signature on the bottom hers. He didn't touch her. Didn't say a word during the entire process. But when it was done, he looked at her and said simply, "She'll be fine by morning." And she was. Elena sat by her mother's bedside, watching her chest rise and fall with steady rhythm. The color had returned to her face. The transfusion worked. The crisis passed. And Elena wanted to cry, to scream, to laugh, but mostly to forget. But the ring on her finger wouldn't let her. That she was someone's wife now. A man who had offered her salvation and made her pay for it with her name. The next morning, James Whitaker sent her an address and a key. "Stay here. Everything you need is provided." The apartment was beautiful. Cold. Expensive. Empty. Elena stood in the doorway, holding the key card in one hand and a small, wrinkled photo of her mom in the other. She was 26 years old, married to a stranger, and for the first time in weeks, she could breathe. But she didn't feel safe. She felt owed, and deeply, painfully out of control. That night, she opened the envelope left on the table. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Agreement. No romantic expectations. No public disclosure of relationship. No involvement in Whitaker Group business. No contact unless necessary. Doors possible after 12 months, upon request. There was one line scribbled at the bottom in black ink. His handwriting was sharp, clean, almost arrogant. "I'll keep my promise. You keep yours." Elena folded the note, turned off the lights, and lay awake until morning, staring at the ceiling and wondering, what kind of man trades blood for marriage? And what kind of woman agrees? Chapter 2. A wife, a stranger. It took 3 days before Elena dared to open the closet. The apartment James Whitaker had given her was pristine glass and marble, white on white, like someone had scrubbed away every trace of human warmth. The only thing that felt alive was the oversized hydrangea by the window, and even that looked like it had a personal florist. But the closet? It wasn't empty. It was full of her. Somehow, without ever asking her size, James had filled it with exactly the right fit. Cotton basics, a navy wool coat, even a pair of boots she'd tried on 3 winters ago and couldn't afford. Down to the books she liked, the tea brand she always chose when she needed to calm down. He didn't know her, but he knew her. And that was the most unnerving part. The apartment had no photos, no personal history. Just a couch that had never sagged, shelves that never held memories, and a perfectly made bed she couldn't bring herself to sleep in. She curled up on the couch instead, staring at the line on the marriage license. Elena Grace Brooks. James Ellis Whitaker. No ceremony, no witnesses. No kiss. And yet, legally binding. Every time she caught her reflection in the kitchen window, she half expected it to look different. But no, same Elena. Same shadows under her eyes. This girl who used to fall asleep reading job listings next to her mother's hospital bed. Now with a husband she hadn't spoken to since signing her life away. On the 5th day, she found the courage to text him. Elena, thank you. Mom's out of ICU. Doctors say she'll be okay. James, good. Elena, I'll start job hunting soon. I won't rely on your money. James, you're already employed. She blinked at the screen. Elena, what? James, you start Monday. Whitaker Group. HR has you on file. Her stomach sank. No, it couldn't be. She showed up that Monday with her resume printed and her chin held high. Sure enough, her name was already on the employee list. Elena Brooks, Administrative Assistant, Executive Division. The receptionist looked at her like she didn't belong. And maybe she didn't. But she smiled anyway and tucked the ring deeper into her coat pocket. He was there. Of course he was. James Whitaker stepped into the morning staff briefing like a storm in tailored navy. Everyone stood when he walked in. No one breathed too loudly. His voice was precise, clipped, not cold exactly, but decisive. Elena sat in the 3rd row, pretending not to notice when his eyes met hers. He said nothing. Didn't even pause. She didn't know if she was relieved or disappointed. That week she worked like a ghost. Showed up early, stayed late, never complained, and always smiled, just enough to make people think she wasn't quietly falling apart. By Wednesday, the whispers began. Isn't she the one who got hired without an interview? Must have known someone. I heard she used to work at a coffee shop. I bet she's sleeping with someone on the board. Elena smiled through it all. Because if they ever found out the truth, it would be worse. Much worse. He didn't speak to her again until Friday. She was organizing file boxes in the hallway when his voice came from behind her. Come with me. She turned. He was already walking away. She followed, heart thudding, all too aware that every pair of eyes in the corridor tracked her like she was walking into a trap. His office was quieter than the rest of the building. Thicker walls, darker wood. The view spanned half of downtown Chicago. He poured a glass of water and set it in front of her. She didn't drink. Is this your idea of making good on our contract? She asked finally. He didn't answer. Instead, he said, You're not doing the work of an assistant. I wasn't hired as one, she replied. I didn't ask for this job. He looked at her then. Really looked. You're avoiding me. You made it clear we weren't supposed to be public, she replied. I'm following your rules. His jaw flexed slightly. You're angry. She said, I'm aware. Of what? I'm your wife on paper and your employee by convenience. Silence stretched between them like glass. He leaned forward just slightly, voice low. I didn't bring you here to punish you. You brought me here to control me, she replied softly. There's a difference. He didn't argue. Instead, he stood, walked to the window, and stared down at the city like it could offer him a way out of this conversation. You think I'm the villain, he said finally. Elena blinked. I think, she said, you're used to getting what you want, and when you don't, you rewrite the rules. He turned then, and for the first time, his expression cracked. Not with anger. but something closer to regret. "I'm not good at people," he admitted. "But I'm not lying about this. The marriage, it wasn't random." "Then what was it?" He looked down, smiled without warmth. "A mistake, maybe?" Elena's chest tightened. Not from hurt, but from something sadder. Filmier. "Then fix it," she said, standing. He looked at her, puzzled. "We can get an annulment," she added. "Easier than a divorce. Less messy. You get your blood donation hero narrative, I get my life back." He didn't move. He didn't nod. Didn't speak. So she walked to the door. But before she opened it, he said quietly, "Your mother isn't the only reason." She stopped. Turned. He met her eyes. But his voice was barely audible. "I've seen you before, Elena. A long time ago. Before the hospital. Before any of this." She stared at him, heartbeat suddenly uneven. "You came into my life like it was nothing," he said, smiling at a stranger, asking if he needed anything. "You ordered a black coffee and left a $5. Elena's mouth parted slightly. "It couldn't be. It was you," she whispered. James nodded. "I never forgot your face." Silence. Pure, still, and fragile. And then Elena turned the knob. "I wish you had," she said softly, and laughed. That night, she sat on the floor of her apartment with a glass of red wine she didn't really want, and a slice of cold pizza she couldn't finish. She remembered that coffee shop. It was 2 years ago. One shift, one smile, one forgettable moment in a blur of long days and unpaid bills. And yet somehow, it had never left him. She stared at her phone. New texts. No missed calls. No apology. But in the middle of the night, when she got up to close the window, she found something on her doorstep. A paper bag. Inside, a cup of black coffee. And a $5 bill. Folded once. Perfectly neat. The CEO she never knew. By the second week, the office no longer whispered when Elena walked in. They stared. From the moment she passed the reception desk to the minute she sat down at her desk in executive services, eyes followed her like a rumor no one had the courage to confirm. She didn't blame them. James Whitaker hadn't exactly been subtle. First, the unexplained promotion from admin assistant to executive liaison. Then, the sudden relocation of her desk to a quiet corner just outside the CEO's private suite. And then, of course, the unmissable moment in the staff cafe when he handed her a steaming cup of black coffee and said, in a voice loud enough for a dozen people to hear, "2 sugars. You used to sweeten it when you were tired." He hadn't looked at her when he said it. But he hadn't needed to. Everyone else did. Tyler Chen, James's assistant and the only person who seemed both amused and unimpressed by office politics, leaned down next to her desk a few hours later and whispered, "Don't worry, he only does that when he's pretending not to care." Elena glanced up. "Pretending not to care about what?" "You," Tyler replied. "Or maybe himself. I haven't figured it out." She gave him a look. "I'm just the messenger," he shrugged, grinning. Later that afternoon, a company-wide email went out. Mandatory attendance, Whitaker Group Annual Masquerade Gala. Dress code, formal. Masks encouraged, spouses welcome. The words on the screen blurred for a second. Spouses welcome. It was a joke, right? Because in every version of her marriage to James Whitaker, the word spouse still felt like something borrowed, like a costume too big in the shoulders, stitched from convenience and silence. She didn't plan to go. She didn't own a dress formal enough, and she had no intention of standing beside a man who had yet to tell a single soul why he really married her. But when she arrived at her apartment that evening, there was a white garment bag hanging from her front door. No note, no explanation. Inside, a navy silk gown that shimmered like midnight on water. Simple, elegant, her exact size. She didn't need a tag to know who sent it. And worse, she didn't need a mirror to know she wanted to wear it. The gala was held at the Fairmont Hotel downtown. Crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, polished men in suits and women in dresses like starlight. Elena arrived alone. She didn't look for him. She told herself she wouldn't. But the second she stepped into the ballroom, she felt it, like gravity shifting. He was already watching her. Across the crowd, behind a mask, but unmistakable. Vanessa Monroe spotted her first. Tall, blonde, effortlessly cruel. The kind of woman who never asked for attention because the world offered it freely. She walked up, flanked by two junior partners like handmaidens. Vanessa said sweetly. I didn't know the waitstaff. Elena smiled. And I didn't realize ghosts could speak. I almost mistook you for irrelevant. Vanessa's smile tightened. She leaned in, voice low. You think a dress can make you belong here? You think wearing his last name makes you one of us? Elena didn't answer. Vanessa stepped back. Darling, she called across the room, loud and purposeful. You'll never be Cinderella. You're just the maid who found the wrong shoe. Elena turned. And there he was. James. No mask. No performance. Just him, walking through the crowd without hesitation. He didn't stop at the podium. He didn't greet the donors. He walked to her, took her hand, laced their fingers, then turned to the entire room and, confused, This is my wife. Her name is Elena. Speak to her with less than respect and you're speaking to me. The silence was electric. Elena wanted to disappear. But his hand didn't let go. He didn't give her time to run, only time to breathe. Later, as the orchestra swelled and couples waltzed, she found herself in the corner near the balcony. He found her there. You're angry, he said softly. She turned to him. Was it worth it? She asked. Making a scene? We needed to know. Now you needed them to know. She looked away. James, I didn't sign up for this. He was quiet for a moment. Then, almost inaudibly, I know. The words hung there, fragile. I didn't plan to fall in love with you, he said, barely more than a whisper. Her breath caught. She blinked. I didn't ask you to, she said. I know, he said again, but I did, long before you ever knew my name. I watched you light up that hospital wing with kindness when I thought the world had none left. Elena swallowed. That wasn't love, that was gratitude. Why? He said. That was the moment I realized not all things that save us have to be loud. Some just bring soup, and smile, and leave us better than we were. Her hands trembled. She wanted to yell, to cry, to pull him closer, to push him away. Instead, she said, Why did you never tell me? I didn't know how, he said honestly. And by the time I thought I could, we were already married. That night, he didn't ask her to stay, and she didn't ask him to explain further. But when the elevator doors closed behind her, she realized something she hadn't before. James Whitaker, the cold, unreachable CEO, had once been a man who sat in a hospital cafe, alone, tired, lost, until someone handed him tea and asked nothing in return. Chapter 4: The Necklace Scandal. The day started with fresh flowers in the lobby. It was someone's birthday, or maybe the anniversary of a deal closed, but Elena didn't ask. She just walked past the arrangements, past the whisperers, and into the elevator that knew her floor without her pressing a button. By now, she had stopped wondering whether people knew she was Mrs. Whitaker. They knew. But today would prove just how little that title protected her. It started with a box. White, square velvet case placed carefully on her desk. No card, no name. Inside, a necklace. A single-cut diamond, delicate, hung on a fine platinum chain, simple but unmistakably expensive. Elena stared at it for a long time before closing the lid. She didn't put it on, didn't touch it again, just slid it into her drawer. At 10:47 a.m. the fire began. Vanessa Monroe stood by the espresso machine, voice pitched just loud enough to carry. "I'm just saying, if a certain someone wanted to impress the boss, she should try harder than stealing his gifts." Elena didn't flinch. She didn't look up. But when she returned to her desk after lunch, the necklace was no longer in the drawer. It was in her handbag. She found out during the weekly leadership meeting. The moment James stepped out of the boardroom, his secretary rushed toward him, holding a tablet and a frantic look. "Elena," she called, too loud. "Can I speak with you a moment?" Elena stood. People turned. The secretary held out the tablet. On the screen, a live security feed. The footage showed Elena alone at her desk, walking in, placing her bag down, then later pulling the necklace out of her drawer and slipping it into the front pocket of her purse. Vanessa's voice sliced through the tension. "Well, that's interesting, isn't it?" Elena looked up. Dozens of eyes. Dozens of unspoken accusations. James was the only one not watching the screen. He was watching her. "Evil?" His voice was neutral, careful. "Did you take it?" Her heart thudded. He said, "I found it on my desk. I put it in my drawer. But I didn't put it in my bag." Vanessa crossed her arms. "Sure you didn't." "I didn't steal anything." Jamin's jaw flecked. "Let's check the cameras from earlier," she said quietly. "From the floor before I arrived." The secretary hesitated. "Security says those feeds were disabled this morning for maintenance." "How convenient," Vanessa muttered. James turned to her sharply. "That's enough." But the damage was done. The word thief didn't need to be said aloud. It was already in the room. James didn't defend her. Not openly. He simply ended the meeting and walked away. And when Elena returned to her desk, the velvet box was gone. At 6:42 p.m., the door to her apartment clicked open. She didn't turn around. She knew it was him. James set his briefcase down, took off his coat. Elena stood at the kitchen sink, washing a single mug. His silence was louder than anything he could have said. So she broke it. "You didn't believe me." He exhaled. "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." He moved closer. "I was trying not to escalate things," he said. "Not in front of them." "Right," she whispered, "because protecting my dignity comes second to maintaining your boardroom composure." He looked at her then. Really looked. "You think I don't care?" "I think you care," she said, "but only when no one's watching." That landed like a slap. But she didn't apologize. "You should have told them," she added. "Told them I'm your wife." James was quiet. "I will," he said finally. "If you want that." The sound of water dripping from the faucet filled the silence between them. "Then do it," she said. He stepped forward. "Elena." "No," she cut him off. "No more rules, no more secrets. You married me. You don't get to keep me in the shadows because it's easier for your image." Her voice cracked, but she didn't look away. "I won't be your ghost anymore." The next morning, she arrived to whispers again. Only this time, they weren't about her. They were about the email. Single statement memo sent from the CEO's office at 6:03. To no clarity. "Elena Brooks is my wife. She is not to be disrespected. She is not to be second-guessed. James Whitaker." Some people laughed. Once people froze. But no one whispered after that. Vanessa didn't return to work that week. Security footage was recovered by accident, they said, and revealed her entering Elena's office early that morning with a security key card that didn't belong to her. The necklace. returned to James's desk by anonymous courier. James didn't mention it again. He didn't need to. He had spoken the only language that mattered in their world: public power. That night, Elena found another white box on her kitchen table. No note. Inside, the same necklace. This time, she picked it up. Not because it sparkled. Not because it was valuable. But because she was tired of shrinking in a life that bore her name. She clasped it around her neck, looked at herself in the mirror, and for the first time, she didn't see the girl who begged a stranger to save her mother. She saw the woman he married, Barn, the birthday that broke us. James didn't believe in birthdays. He said it casually one night over dinner as he loosened his tie and scrolled through emails on his phone. Just another day, he said. I don't like drawing attention to things that fade. Elena hadn't planned to argue, but her heart folded quietly in the corner of her chest when he said it, because her mother used to bake carrot cake every year, even when the fridge was half empty. Birthdays weren't just about aging, they were about remembering, surviving, choosing joy in a world that rarely offered it. So she made one anyway. The morning of his birthday, she woke up early. Not for grand gestures, but for something warm and small, something real. She baked, from scratch. It was a little lopsided, the frosting melted too fast, but it smelled like something she set it on the kitchen counter, next to a single candle and a note. But no Jogo? I asked. Another day. Then she left for work. He didn't mention it? Not in the office. Not by text. Not when they passed in the hallway like strangers pretending not to be. By noon, Elena's stomach was tight with doubt. Maybe he hadn't seen it. Maybe she'd overstepped. At 3:15 p.m., she saw it in the office fridge. Watched at the candle, still leaning sideways. The note crumpled underneath. By 6 p.m., he hadn't come home. By 8, she was still waiting, curled on the sofa in the navy silk gown he liked best. At 9:12, her phone lit up. Tyler Chen. Hey, just FYI, the team surprised James with drinks at the Grafton. Mu Zhen showed up. Figured you'd want to know. Elena stared at the screen. Me twice. Her hands were steady when she texted back. Thanks. She showed up without a mask. No makeup, no armor. Just quiet fury wrapped in a coat too thin for October wind. Inside, the lounge glowed with low lights and clinking glasses. And there he was, James, leaning back in a leather booth, tie undone, whiskey in hand. Mu Zhen sat beside him. Too close. She touched his arm as she laughed. And James didn't move away. Elena stood at the edge of the room, watching, measuring, and grieving something that hadn't fully begun before it already started to fall apart. She almost walked out. But then James looked up, and their eyes met. He stilled, then stood. Fast. The entire table quieted. Elena, he said, voice low. Mu Zhen smiled tightly. Oh, wife duties? Elena's voice didn't shake when she spoke. I came to return your birthday gift. James frowned. Why gift? She reached into her coat pocket, pulled out the note, the crumpled one from under the cake. She handed it to him like a piece of evidence. He took it. He read it. His jaw clenched. Elena, I didn't see this. She shrugged. I saw enough. She turned to leave. And then, Mu Zhen's voice cut through the tension like acid. If women think baking a cake is enough to hold a man like James Whittaker. Elena froze, turned back, and walked straight up to her. Women mistake history for relevance, she said quietly. Don't confuse time served with love earned. Mu Zhen blinked. James took a step forward, reaching for her. Elena? But she was already gone. He came home 2 hours later. smelling of scotch and guilt. The cake was still there, still untouched. He looked at her like he didn't know whether to speak or surrender. "I didn't plan any of that," he said finally. "They surprised me. I didn't ask her to come." Elena didn't move. "She touched you," she said softly, "and you didn't stop her." "I didn't want to make a scene. Why, it was okay for me to stand there and watch you pretend with someone who calls me a ghost in the halls?" His silence answered for him. Elena crossed her arms over her chest. "Tell me the truth, James." "About what?" "About us. About what this really is. Because I'm tired of waking up every day, wondering if I'm just your most elegant mistake." His voice was so quiet she almost didn't hear it. "You're not a mistake." She looked away. "You just forgot I was your wife." "No hypothermia," he said, firmer now. "I didn't forget." He stepped forward, eyes stormy. "I was afraid that if I got too close, I'd ruin it." "You already are," she said, and left the room. That night, she cried quietly into her pillow. Not because he didn't love her, but because maybe he did and didn't know how to show it. And maybe that was worse. The next morning, the cake was gone. It had no note. Just an empty counter and an even emptier heart. Chapter 6. Something broke between us. The next morning, Elena didn't ask where the cake went. She just noticed the garbage had been emptied earlier than usual. The counters were wiped clean, there was no note. Not even a crumb left behind. James poured his coffee in silence, eyes tired, jaw tense. They didn't speak. She didn't ask why he came home at midnight. He didn't ask why she never texted back. But something in the room had shifted. It wasn't loud, it wasn't cruel. It was colder than that. By the afternoon, the apartment was quiet again. Elena sat on the floor of her closet, sorting through old sweaters and receipts she hadn't touched since the move. She found the contract again, the original marriage agreement, still sealed. Clause 1. No romantic expectations. Clause 5. Divorce possible after 12 months, upon request. They were 8 months in. 4 months left. She ran her finger over the paper. 4 months, and then they could walk away. Would he? Would she? She didn't know anymore. That night, James didn't come home. He didn't text. He didn't call. And when she called Tyler just once, just to make sure he picked up on the second ring. "Elena? Is he okay?" Tyler paused. "He's fine, in a meeting. It's 11:11 p.m. Another pause. Muzen stopped by the office. Elena closed her eyes. "Got it," she said. "Elena. I'm fine." She hung up before he could lie for James again. The next morning, she didn't go to the office. Instead, she packed a bag and took the train up to Evanston, to the old brick hospital where her mother now volunteered part-time. She found her in the garden behind the building, pruning herbs with gloved hands and a sun hat that tilted too far to one side. Her mother looked up, surprised. "Sweetheart?" "I just needed air," Elena said. Her mother took one look at her face and knew not to press. She dusted off a bench and sat beside her daughter. They sat in silence for a long time, watching the wind pass through the rosemary. "You love him?" her mother asked finally. Elena didn't answer right away. "I don't know," she said. "It's not a no. It's not a yes, either." Her mother smiled, soft and sad. "Then, it's a maybe. And maybes are dangerous, because they make you stay longer than you should." Elena rested her head on her shoulder. "I'm tired of wondering who I am to him." Her mother brushed a hand through her hair. "Then stop wondering," she said. "Ask." When she got home that night, James was already there. Loosened tie, sleeves rolled, a half-eaten sandwich beside his laptop. The apartment smelled like quiet apologies that never made it into words. She stood by the door. He looked up. "You left," he said. "You didn't come home," she replied. He closed the laptop. "I needed to think." "About what?" He hesitated. I stepped closer. "I want to know the truth, James." Us. He leaned back against the counter. His eyes were heavy, like something he hadn't let himself feel until now. "I've never known how to love someone," he said, voice quiet. "Not the way they need." She nodded. "That's not an answer. It's all I have." She stood in the silence that followed, her heart slowly splintering under the weight of 1,000 almosts. Then gently, "Will you want this to end?" He looked at her for a long time. "Ah," he said. "Then fight for it." "I am." "You're not." The argument didn't explode. It eroded. Word by word, moment by moment, the gap between them widened until she turned away and he let her go without reaching for her hand. That night, they slept in the same bed, but it felt like an ocean stretched between their spines. And for the first time, Elena dreamed of walking away. The truth I never asked for. It began with a folder on his desk. Elena had come in late after lunch, having taken an extra 30 minutes just to feel the sun on her face, and noticed his office door crack open. James wasn't inside. The folder wasn't labeled, just thick, heavy, sitting right there beside his monogrammed pen. She didn't mean to touch it. She just meant to straighten it, to make it look less like a forgotten burden and more like an intentional placement. But then she saw her name, and everything changed. Inside the folder were pages. Dozens. Photos. Note. Dates. Record. The earliest one was dated 2 years before they met. Subject: Elena Grace Brooks, age 24. Education: University of Chicago. Family: Mother Linda Brooks, patient at St. Catherine's Oncology. Her breath caught. Each page detailed where she worked, where she ate, what bus route she took home. There were even photos of her standing in the hallway outside her mom's room, smiling at nurses, sleeping with a book in her lap. Private moment. Sacred ones. Watched. Collected. Filed. She didn't remember sitting down. Only that her hands were shaking when she closed the folder and backed away from the desk. Behind her, the door clicked. "Elena?" "James." Her chest tightened. She turned slowly. "You've been following me," she said, voice low, like a warning wrapped in disbelief. James didn't speak. "Before we met, before the contract, you knew who I was." Still nothing. Her voice broke now. "Why would you do this?" He stepped forward, slowly, like approaching a wounded animal. "Elena, don't lie to me." "I'm not lying." "Then tell me the truth, all of it." He looked down. And when he finally spoke, his voice was softer than she had ever heard it. "I saw you at the hospital, once. I was visiting my father before he passed." She blinked. "You smiled at me," he said. "Just asked if I needed help, told me which elevator wasn't broken, gave me your umbrella because I didn't have one." "I don't even remember that," she whispered. "I never forgot it." He paused. "My father died. I couldn't get that moment out of my head. I found your name on the volunteer sheet. I asked someone in security to give me your last name." "That's not romantic," she snapped. "That's stalking." "I didn't mean to." "You hired a private investigator." His face paled. She pulled the photos out from the folder, one by one. "This is my mom's clinic. This is our old apartment building. You have records of my life, James, my life, and you never once told me." He took a step forward. "I was going to." "Why?" He was silent. Tears welled in her eyes, hot and furious. You chose me for the contract, she said, because you already knew everything about me, because I was convenient. And because you were brave. I froze. He continued. You were kind when the world had no reason to be. You had nothing, and still you made everyone around you feel like they were something. She stared at him. Bro, I loved you before I ever knew how to say it, he said. But I was afraid if you knew the truth, you'd never trust anything real between us. She shook her head. You were right. That night, she didn't go home. She packed a small bag, left the ring on the counter. Didn't leave a note. She figured he'd know. She checked into a tiny hotel off Michigan Avenue. Nothing fancy, just clean and forgettable, and stared at the ceiling until the city went quiet. Her phone buzzed. Sent one message. James. I never meant to hurt you, but I understand if you can't forgive me. She turned the screen face down and wept, not just for the lie, but for the love that had been built on something she never consented to. Chapter 8. What We Choose Next. It had been 4 days. 4 days of silence. 4 days of unanswered texts and sleepless nights and waking up in a hotel room that smelled nothing like home. Elena hadn't spoken to anyone. Not Tyler, not her mother, not even the front desk clerk who left little yellow flowers on her pillow each afternoon. But grief has a way of settling in strange places. It wasn't rage anymore. Not exactly. It was a kind of hollow. A grief for the version of herself that had believed in clean beginnings. On the 5th night, it rained. Slow, heavy drops that drummed against the window with a kind of sorrow only October could carry. She sat in the window seat in a borrowed sweater, knees tucked under her chin, watching the city blur behind glass. A soft knock came at the door. It rushed, not desperate, just quiet, like an apology that wasn't sure it deserved to be heard. She hesitated, then stood. When she opened it, he was there. James, wet from the rain, coat clinging to his frame, hair mussed, eyes that hadn't slept. In his hands, a white paper bag. No flowers, no suit, no fanfare. Just him. He didn't speak. He just held the bag out to her with 2 hands like it was fragile. She took it. Inside, a slice of carrot cake. Lopsided. Homemade. The same kind she'd made on his birthday. Only this time, the note tucked underneath read, It's not just another day. Elena stared at it for a long time before lifting her gaze. James still hadn't moved. I didn't know how to come back, he said, voice raw, so I started with the truth. She didn't speak. I know what I did, he continued, and I know what it cost you. He stepped closer. I didn't fall in love with your file. I fell in love with the way you held your grief like it was something sacred, with how you folded kindness into moments most people forget. His voice caught. I was terrified that if you knew, you'd think it was all built on something false. She looked at him, barely breathing. Wasn't it? He shook his head. No, it was built on something real. I just didn't know how to tell you that and still deserve you. She swallowed. James, I'm not asking you to forget. I'm not even asking you to forgive me right now. He stepped back. I just wanted you to know I see you. Not the woman I watched on a screen, not the name in a file, just you. She held his gaze. Something in her chest shifted. Later they sat across from each other on the hotel bed, the carrot cake between them. She took a bite first, but then handed him the fork. They didn't say much. Sometimes healing isn't a conversation. It's a pause. It's the quiet understanding that what was broken might never return to what it was, but could still become something new. He stayed until midnight, with no kisses. No confessions, his coat folded neatly on the chair and his presence steady beside her. Before he left, he turned back. "I'll wait," he said. And this time, he meant it. Chapter 9. The Letter I Never Sent. There was an old shoebox beneath the bed in the apartment they once called home. Elena hadn't opened it in months, not since before the wedding, not since before she'd started sleeping with her back to James and her questions tucked beneath her breath. But that morning, with rain still sliding down the windows and the ghost of carrot cake still clinging to her taste buds, she found herself back in that apartment, alone. And she pulled the box out. Inside, a handful of dried lavender, 3 faded Polaroids, and letters she never mailed. Letters addressed to him. Never James, never Mr. Whitaker. Just him. The man she once imagined falling for without condition. She opened one. It was dated 6 weeks before their marriage. Dear M. Sometimes I wonder if love is less about timing and more about courage. Like maybe we don't fall in love at the perfect moment. Maybe we just learn to leap while the ground still feels unsteady. I don't know who you are yet, but I hope when you arrive I'll be brave enough to meet you with both hands open. And I hope, more than anything, you'll know that I never needed perfection. Just truth. Elena let the letter fall to her lap. Truth. The very thing they never started with. And maybe that was the cruelest part. Not the lie, not the file, but the absence of truth between them when she would have given it so freely. Her phone buzzed. Tyler Chen. He's losing sleep, and no one's seen him smile in days. Just saying. She smiled faintly. Tyler never picked sides, but his loyalty had always spoken quietly for her. She typed one word. Thanks. That afternoon, she took a walk. No makeup, no mask. Just a wool coat, her mother's scarf, and a letter clutched in her hand. The woman shrugged. Olivia didn't go to the office, but she went to the roof. The one place where James always said he could breathe. Where he'd taken her, once, on a night the city lights felt like fireworks no one noticed. She found him there. Alone. No tie, no briefcase, just him, sitting on the ledge like someone waiting for something that may not come. And he saw her, he stood. Billionaire. She didn't speak. She walked to him and handed him the letter. He opened it slowly. He read every word. His hands trembled as he lowered the page. I was so afraid, he whispered. I was I. They stood there for a long time, breathing, listening to the hum of the city around them. I don't know how to start over, he said. Then don't, she said. Just start from here. He nodded, and then reached for her hand. This time she didn't pull away. They didn't rush back into. They didn't kiss under the rain or promise forever on a rooftop. They just stood still, together. For the first time, without lies between them. Michelle told Dawn, the day I stopped running. Elena hadn't planned to come back. Not fully. She told herself it was temporary, that the extra key in her coat pocket didn't mean anything, that leaving a toothbrush didn't mean she was staying. But Sunday morning came, and James was already in the kitchen. No suit, no coffee, just bare feet, tousled hair, and eggs burning in the pan. Good morning, he said without looking up. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. You know you're about to set off the smoke alarm, right? He looked back at her with a sheepish grin. There was a time when she hated that grin. Now it felt like home. They ate burnt eggs on the patio, wrapped in mismatched sweaters in silence. Not the bitter kind. Just quiet, healing. James tapped his fingers against the mug. I've been thinking, he said, about rewriting the contract. Elena raised an eyebrow. You mean the one we built our whole life around? He nodded. That one. Why would the new terms be? He pulled a folded napkin from his pocket and read. Clause 1. Wake up and tell the truth, even when it's hard. Clause 2. Say, I love you before the day ends. Clause 3. Take turns making coffee. Clause 4. No more leaving. Clause 5. If either party forgets why they stayed, the other reminds them. She blinked. It was funny how words that simple could hit like thunder. Elena, he said, quieter now, I'm not perfect, but I'm staying. For real. Not for contracts, not for saving face. Just for you. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something she hadn't meant to bring. The original contract. Still in its envelope, still sealed. She held it up. I was going to give this back, she said. I thought it was the only thing tying us together. Jim? He tore it in half. Then again. Till nothing remained but paper snow between them. That night, they danced in the living room with no music. Just the quiet hum of the heater and the city blinking outside the window. Her head on his shoulder. His hands steady against her back. She whispered, I forgive you. And he said, I'll spend my life making sure you never have to again. In the months that followed, they didn't fix everything. There were still arguments. There were still late nights. But something had changed. They had stopped running. Not from the past. Not from the pain. Not from each other. James sent an official email to the company that spring. Effective immediately, Mrs. Elena Whitaker is no longer just a name on paper. She's the woman who saved my life more than once. Treat her with the respect she deserves or find another employer. No one questioned it after that. Not even Mugen. Especially not after Elena walked into the gala that year in a dress James designed just for her, cut from the same silk he used to wipe his mouth at their first dinner together. He always kept it, he said, in case he forgot how messy love was supposed to be. And sometimes, Elena would still find herself wondering what might have happened if she hadn't jumped into that pool. And if she hadn't begged him to save her mother. If she hadn't married a man who knew her before she knew him. But then, she'd look at the way he brought her coffee every morning. Black, no sugar, just how she liked it. Or how he kissed her forehead before meetings, even when they fought. And then she'd think, maybe love isn't always honest at the start. But the ones who stay, the ones who try, they write a better ending than anything we could have planned. It's the kind of love that stays. There are stories that begin with thunder, dramatic, wild, unforgettable. But this one began quietly, with a girl who jumped into the wrong pool, and a man who had everything, except a reason to come home. It wasn't love at first sight. It was something more dangerous. It was vulnerability. It was two people pretending not to need each other and then realizing they couldn't breathe without trying. They lied. They broke trust. They fought like strangers. But somehow, they stayed. Not because it was easy. Not because it was written in a contract. But because one day, she stopped running. And he finally reached for her with both hands. Elena never got a fairy tale wedding. No grand ballroom, no rain of roses. But she got something better. A quiet kitchen. A burnt cake. A man who remembered her birthday after forgetting everything else. James never meant to fall in love with the girl he watched from afar. But he did. Not with the perfect version of her. With the one who cracked eggs badly. Who held grief like a prayer. Who forgave slowly, tenderly, after knowing exactly what it cost. They live now in the same apartment. 2 toothbrushes by the sink. 1 shoebox under the bed, filled not with secrets, but letters they write to each other on hard days. And a contract rewritten on a napkin. Clause 5 remains their favorite. Either party forgets why they stayed, the other reminds them. Because sometimes, love isn't loud. It's not fireworks or grand gestures. Sometimes it's standing at the sink doing the dishes. Sometimes it's knowing the worst about someone and still choosing them again. If you've ever been broken, if you've ever been lied to, if someone once loved you badly and you're not sure if love is worth trying again, I hope you remember this. The right love doesn't demand you to be perfect. It just asks you to stay, to keep showing up, to admit when you're scared, to start over. Even if you're the one who made the mess. Even if the contract you wrote in the beginning no longer fits the people you've become. Because the best kind of love, it's not the one that starts flawlessly. It's the one that chooses you again. Even after knowing the whole truth. If this story touched you, I hope you'll share your heart in the comments. Tell us, what clause would be in your rewritten love contract? What part of this story reminded you of someone you've never stopped loving? Someone out there needs your words more than you know. Let's remind each other. A kind of love that stays, still exists. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. We'll see you in the next story.